And I want to talk to you a little bit about how we have established what we believe to be the world's first framework that acknowledges and accounts for and scales a grower's regenerative journey. We call it ZQRX. But first, who are we? We're the New Zealand Merino Company. We're responsible for selling merino wool, as the name would suggest. We operate around about 75% of the national merino wool clip and about 10% of the strong wool clip. Fundamentally, though, our job is to connect brands to consumers and brands to our growers. We align value chains. We shift from volume to value. But what I'm here to talk to you about is the how. How do we do that? How do we shift from volume to value? How do we take it off a whiteboard and actually turn it into commerce? So I have a background in environmental science, and like all graduates, you come out and you're all bright and bushy-tailed and you're excited about changing the world and driving a sustainability agenda. And so I thought, how do I do that? I'm going to get involved in local government. I'm going to work to try and drive legislation to try and support growers down a more sustainable pathway. And who better, because local government drives legislation and they also drive education, two sides of a coin that are so incredibly important. What I came to learn quickly is that education's fantastic, but you need a motivation to apply that education, and it can be a really, really long, slow and lonely road when you're not getting the recognition and the reward for it. And I also learned that legislation, while extraordinarily powerful and able to drive change really quickly, it's also an extraordinarily blunt tool that can sometimes lead to sometimes the opposite of what we really are hoping to achieve. And so it got me thinking about what are some other ways to drive change. And some other ways to drive change are about connection to market, about listening to what it is our consumers are asking for and using those consumers to incentivize the change. And when that's coupled with really good sound education and it's underpinned and supported by, if we like, the stick in terms of legislation, then we have a powerful motive for change. And I looked around for organisations that might be doing that, and the New Zealand Merino Company stood out. It stood out as an organisation that was aligned to its consumers, that understood what it was that was driving a consumer purchase behaviour and then customising a supply base specific to that. And so that's when I started at NZM, and that's when I started talking to brands about what was motivating the purchases of their products. And it got me thinking about this idea of consumption guilt. Fundamentally, what it boils down to is consumers are feeling guilty about the products that they're buying. They are listening to the activists. The activists are sharing their knowledge. They're raising the awareness. They're lifting the spectre of what's going on our planet, and they're doing an extraordinarily good job. And what that's doing is it's motivating consumers to ask themselves, how can they be part of the solution rather than part of the problem? How do they mitigate the guilt that they feel by purchasing products? They do that by purchasing products that align more effectively to their personal value set. If consumption has been part of what's got us into the situation that we're in, can consumption of the right products actually be part of the cure? And I believe fundamentally it can be. What we've got to get right is the how. So how? How do we scale this? How do we enable growers and consumers to grab the opportunities that the previous speakers have talked about? I believe there's three things. We need to rewire our value chain, we need to partner with brands of purpose, and we need to provide confidence that we're doing what we say we're doing. And the old model won't serve for that. So when we talk about rewiring our value chains, the slide behind me speaks to the old volume-driven wool supply chain. It's linear. It's two-dimensional. It's combative. The only feedback that an end consumer gives is to the brand that they purchase from. There's no connectivity between the consumer and the grower, the people that are producing the product. It's extraordinarily volatile. And fundamentally, at every single point along that supply chain, there is a winner and a loser of every single transaction. There's someone that feels really good about the transaction, and quite likely there's somebody that feels not so good about that transaction. It is the antithesis of innovation. It is the antithesis of collaboration. And it won't serve for our future. What will serve is taking a far more consumer-centric model. where the consumer is in the middle. The consumer provides direct feedback to all stages of the value chain. That drives innovation, that enables insights to be taken, to be grabbed, to be leveraged, and to be built through the products. It's reflective of the need for all parties in the value chain to win. If there is a single party in the value chain that's losing, the value chain quite simply will not work. And this is the model that we have built with our partners, which brings us to our next point around partnerships of purpose. An example I want to use is an organisation called VF Corporation. For those that don't know VF own Icebreaker and Smartwool. They also own the North Face and Timberland and brands like that. They are a brand of purpose. They speak to their values beyond profit. They seek to power movements of sustainable and active lifestyles for the betterment of people and our planet. So how are they going to do that? They need us in their value chain to help them to live to those values. They need to partner with people like us, with people like you and our growers to enable them to fulfill that promise to their customers. And us enabling them to do that is valuable. It's important to them. It's worth something. And if we can get this right, there is value in it. Over 75% of the wool that we now sell is sold via direct forward contracts. And those contract prices are set at a significant advantage to the long-term average commodity price. To provide a little more context, one of the VF brands, Icebreaker, have a 10-year forward contract. That means that a grower that has an Icebreaker 10-year contract knows that for the next 10 years, every single kg of wool that they produce that meets those specifications will be bought by Icebreaker at a price above the commodity price. Imagine the certainty. Imagine the confidence you could go into decision making on your farm about. Imagine the ability to invest capital, to think about farm succession. That's the value that's being delivered through these partnerships. Another partner of ours, Allbirds. Some of you will be familiar with the Allbirds story, but in terms of speaking to purpose, one of Allbirds' core values is about driving a rethink of the way we consume and the way we produce products. And so when Amazon made a shoe that was very similar to the Allbirds shoe, rather than taking Amazon to court, what Allbirds did was they congratulated Amazon. They said, "It is absolutely fantastic that you're replicating our shoe. We think it's brilliant. We're a tiny company. We can't get this product to as many people as we need to. And the more people that use it, the better, because it's going to have a lighter footprint on our planet. But if you're going to copy our shoe, copy our supply chain too. Copy the raw materials that we're using. Copy the way that we produce. Copy the supply chains that we're using. And you know what? Here it is. It's all open source. Here's our sugar foam that we're using for our soles. Here's the LCA that we've used to calculate our carbon footprint." And to the point about the carbon footprint, every single product they now sell has their greenhouse gas footprint on it. And guess what? Most of that footprint is generated on farm. And so the conversation they now have with us is, hey, we're buying your wool, we've got this great big footprint, you're responsible for a big chunk of it, how are you going to help us drive that down? Partnerships. These partnerships extend between just us and the brand. They're actually crossing across brand as well. So in February, these brands of purpose believe this model so much that they put aside the traditional commercial norms of competition and partnered with us to collectively launch ZQRX. They recognise that the problems that the planet are facing go far beyond any one individual entity. And so they've partnered with us to drive a whole new model for production and consumption that's steeped in the values of putting back. It's steeped in the concept of shifting from sustainability to regeneration. As the world recognises that sustainability isn't enough and that we need to go beyond sustainability to putting back, to leaving the place better than what it was, we have to ask ourselves, how do we provide confidence to the rhetoric? How do we give confidence to brands that that is, in fact, exactly what we're doing? How do we communicate and demonstrate that we are living a regenerative mindset? It's simple, we do an audit, right? What I can tell you is that the last thing the world needs right now is yet another audit. And I'm partially responsible. In 2007, we launched ZQ. We launched ZQ because ZQ was a tool to give confidence to consumers and to brands that farmers were meeting the highest levels in the world with regard to animal welfare, environmental integrity, and social responsibility, that their product was traceable all the way back to source. We set it up as an audit program. We use Assure Quality to do our auditing, and it's awesome. We've gone from 5 brand partners with contracts in 2007 to 120 brand partners with forward contracts today, on the back of the confidence that that audit system shares. The trouble with auditing, and the trouble with a minimum standard, is that it drives mediocrity. It leaves stories untold. Every single audit that we do, we find growers that are doing extraordinary things that go way above and beyond the minimum acceptable practice, and they're not being accounted for. They're regenerating natural areas of indigenous forest. They're working with their local communities. They're working with their local iwi. None of that fits within an audit framework. And yet that's what regeneration's about. That's what regenerative agriculture is all about. That's the essence of it. Regen knows no destination. It's a journey. And it's not painted in black and white. And that's what audits do. Audits look at things in black and white. And so we need a model that reflects the nuance of regenerative agriculture, that reflects the interactions between land and people and animal and soils and plants that's so unique to every individual farm and to every individual that's involved in it. So how do we give confidence to brands and consumers that farms are genuinely regenerating and genuinely improving? We don't know. So we asked some of our customers. We brought together a group of our brand partners. This is at the top end of the Rakaia Gorge. And in this photo, we've got representatives from Icebreaker, from Smartwool, from Allbirds, from the North Face, from VF Corporation. We've got scientists, we've got growers, we've got brands, and we're all sitting there saying, this regen thing, how do we implement it? How do we prove it? How does it apply in this context and in this context and in this context? And what we landed on was that this is about a mindset. This is about a mindset of progress rather than perfection. It's about continuous improvement, and it's about underpinning all of that with really sound science and with data. It's about the fusion between technology and biology. It's about using the knowledge that we have because we've farmed this country for generations, and we know that that part of the farm performs this way and that part of the farm performs that way, and linking that through to science and data to prove it. It also speaks to the complexity interrelationship of all of those. And so to demonstrate that, we developed the ZQRX index. You'll see it's split into 3 core pillars: environment, animals, and people. And within those 3 core pillars, there's 15 KPIs where a grower can measure themselves and measure their performance and their cadence of change against them. The beauty of this is that a grower who might be particularly passionate about biodiversity can score really highly in biodiversity, and maybe not so highly in other areas, and that is absolutely fine. And they might score really highly in social responsibility and not in other areas, and that's completely fine because it's down to the individual. A really important part of the index is the ZQ in the middle and the little white line, because to be part of the ZQRX index, you must first be ZQ, which means you must first pass that minimum acceptable practice. What this does is it captures all of the gaps, all of the things in between. And it's supported by an incredible team of very, very talented people who are focused on building tools, not rules, to support growers in driving this change. It's supported by a digital platform that creates digital twins of the farms, not just so that we can monitor what's happening on the individual farms, but so that we can give an incredibly immersive experience to consumers who want to dig in, who want to go to the very farm that provided the product that they are wearing. And so you can imagine it was with some trepidation in June that we ran a workshop with 350 farmers at 6 o'clock in the morning to talk to them about regenerative agriculture. If anyone had told me that was going to happen before lockdown, that we'd be talking to 350 farmers on a Zoom call about regenerative agriculture, I won't say what I would have said. But we did, and we sold this in, and we had our brand partners there talking about the importance of it. And as a direct result of that, effectively overnight, we had 173 farmers sign up to be part of the program. And we have a waiting list of a similar number. And that represents 1.7 million hectares of land where growers are focusing specifically on how they might drive a regenerative future, how they might customise their farming system specific to the values that their customers are asking them for. And so to conclude, I want to take a moment to celebrate. I want to take a moment to celebrate the activists. Those that are raising the bar, those that are highlighting the challenges that the planet is facing, those that aren't afraid to skip school and march against climate change. But more than the activists, I want to celebrate someone else. I want to celebrate the actionists. I want to celebrate those farmers that are out there every day living a regenerative mindset, actively driving their farms to leave it better than it was when they found it. Because they are the heroes. They are the ones that are taking the message from the activists, the message from the scientists, and implementing it. And they're being rewarded for doing so, as they should be, by their markets. And I want to invite you to be part of our journey. Part of the journey to be better than yesterday, but not quite as good as tomorrow. Thank you.